You're listening to Heroes of Healthcare, a series about the bold, selfless, and innovative individuals who are serving our communities with compassion and care. This episode is sponsored by Jackson & Coker Locum Tenens. If you are seeking interim physician or advanced practitioner coverage at your facility, or are a practitioner who is looking for more work-life balance, visit them at jacksonandcoker.com to learn more about their services. Now, let's get into the show.
We are continuing our women's health journey on Heroes of Healthcare and are joined by co-founder and CEO of ScreenMe, Dr. Golnoush Golshirazi. ScreenMe is an innovative online platform focused on personalized advice, care, and recommendations for a variety of women's health concerns. Dr. Golshirazi is a PhD molecular biology scientist with a mission to educate women about their own bodies and put an end to this topic being considered taboo. During this episode, Dr. Golshirazi talks about her own journey with a very painful endometriosis and how it inspired her to create ScreenMe. They are using this platform to break down barriers and ensure women everywhere have the vaginal health education they need to live their healthiest lives. Dr. Golshirazi, thank you again for being a guest on Heroes of Healthcare. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here and to be talking about such important topics.
It absolutely is. And can you just go ahead and start with letting our listeners know, just share more about your background, what inspired you to establish ScreenMe, especially considering your personal struggle with endometriosis?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of my educational background, I'm a scientist, I'm a molecular biologist, and a geneticist by training. I struggle, women's health, I am a woman, and so women's health has been my life forever. But I think from the day I started my periods, that's when things really changed for me. I think that's the case for the majority of those who do have periods. The first period kicks and your life changes. And mine was a painful change. I had very painful periods from day one. I didn't think I just started my period. I thought I'm dying. And, it was, my parents were thinking of taking me to the hospital when I went to the bathroom and I said, oh my God, there's blood everywhere. And my mom said, oh, it's just her period. And everything was fine because it was just my period. And I was 12 at that time. I wasn't old enough, wise enough, or experienced enough to question things that were labeled normal at the time. And so I thought, this is it. I am now a woman. And so I will experience pain. And I think a lot of women relate to that. We've all been there, majority of us. And pain seems to be somehow inherited as a woman. But that's not right. I didn't know that, of course. And I went through life experiencing excruciating period pains, which were disruptive to my everyday life, to school, later to university, and then to things like, I never thought, but what am I going to do in terms of work? How am I going to have a job where my boss won't be angry at me for having to miss sometimes because I can't physically get out of my bed? I would constantly go to doctors. I would try to seek help. And I was constantly dismissed by the healthcare system, being given things like, ibuprofen and paracetamol, which I had obviously been taking for years and which had obviously not been helpful. And it was after 12, 13 years that I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis. As an accidental diagnosis, actually. It wasn't that they were looking for endometriosis. I was having some digestive issues investigated, and that's when endometriosis was picked up accidentally. And even then, I was told I have endometriosis, and that's it. They said if I'm trying to have a baby, I wasn't. And it made me question, our healthcare system, our society as a whole, in terms of, I was a scientist. I went to Cambridge, If it came to education, I had it all. I was still lost and clueless about my body, my own body. And I didn't have enough information. I didn't have enough support. I didn't have enough direction. And why wasn't the science that I knew existed being used for women and for their health? And that's when I really started questioning, what it is that we need to be doing. And my co-founder, Dr. Łukasz Czyszewski, we're doing our PhD at the time together, and he was a rock in my life, really getting through my PhD, given all my symptoms, including my pain, my anxiety, and everything. And we decided that we were going to start a venture looking at women's health and trying to fill in gaps. We were going to try and bring our expertise and our education in order to bridge gaps that may exist for women in women's health. And it didn't take us long to realize that one of those areas was women's intimate health. It seemed like the vagina was an organ that no one even thought of as an organ, as just a big black box that everyone seemed to be, throwing their shoulders up about. If women had infections, if they had symptoms, if anything, included the vagina came up, doctors didn't even have answers. So we decided that we were going to bring the science that we knew in order to provide insight into women's health from a vaginal and reproductive aspect. And so we started ScreenMe, where we offer screening of vaginal and seminal environments through next generation sequencing, which is gold standard, where we can screen everything that is there, bacteria and yeast, and really provide insight as to how healthy a woman's vagina or a man's semen is, and what could be causing the underlying root cause of many issues like infections, like HPV, cervical cancer, miscarriage, unexplained infertility.
That's remarkable. And you said so much going through this, but I'm just grateful that you were brave enough and your co-founder was brave enough to take this on, because it is such a vital organ. It's amazing to think that it doesn't have more press and there's not a larger community to work on these intimate women's health issues, considering we all were born from this very important organ. So it's shocking.
We're even scared to say the name of the organ, which is
exactly. Well, I'm going to say vagina right now because I'm not afraid of it. But you mentioned that you suffered with this pain for years. When you went into, I guess, your teenage years and college years, did you talk about this with other friends and just share with them how you were feeling and how painful it was to you?
No, this is the thing. I didn't think that I was special. I thought, in a way, it's also embarrassing. I felt like I would be dismissed. If I said that I am missing school because I have very painful periods, well, other people had periods. Wouldn't they think that, well, you're being weak? Or, I have period cramps and I come to school. Or I guess there's just this inherent shame associated with it that I never even thought about. I think it was subconscious. I never really thought about speaking about it. Very close friends of mine knew that I get very painful periods, but we never talked about it. We never sat down as young girls or young women and said, let's discuss how we experience our individual periods. It was never a topic. The other thing is, school never talked about it. We had these lessons where you're taught how to put on a condom, but no one ever talks about, well, how do you deal with your period pains? What is a normal period? That is a huge problem I think even in our educational system.
It's shocking. And do you know the statistic? I saw one recently, but I don't want to misspeak about it. The number of cases, endometriosis, or the percentage of women who suffer from endometriosis, maybe not even realizing it.
They say it's 1 in 10. However, that's an underestimate. We know that 1 in 10 women suffer from endometriosis based on the number of diagnoses that is done. But a lot of women are not diagnosed. So the stats are not accurate. And so it is very likely more than that.
It's shocking, but I'm so grateful that ScreenMe, they focus on preventative care for women at just different stages of life. Can you elaborate on the different types of care you offer and just how those contribute to women's health?
Yeah, of course. So, even though I struggle with endometriosis, and endometriosis is such a big umbrella, it's a whole body disease. It's not just a reproductive disease. Women's health consists of many things. And so with ScreenMe, we had to narrow it down and focus on one part, how can we bridge gaps? And it was, we decided to come in and focus on the vaginal and seminal environments, bacterial environments. So the vagina is an organ that, many women are born with. And it's actually an immune regulating organ, even though usually it's not thought of as anything other than something that's either shove things out or shove things in, whereas that is not the case. It's a very important immune modulating organ. It protects your reproductive organs and everything in your pelvic floor also. And that's something that's not known and not spoken about. So the environment in the vagina, whether it's healthy or not, is basically what puts a woman at risk of having other issues. And the health of the vagina means if you're protected from infections or not, from STDs or not, if you clear out things like HPV or not, and your also fertility health, miscarriage and so on. At ScreenMe, we provide screening of that vaginal environment. Previously in the past, the healthcare system has used very ancient methods, which are swabs. You feel like you have an infection, they swab you, and they do things like cultures, which is they try to grow bacteria in a plate in a lab. This is very limited. Not all bacteria can be grown, and the accuracy is very low. And so we get a lot of false negatives. And often women don't get any answers, either dismissed or put on rounds of antibiotics with no certainty of what is going on. We've now introduced another method, which is instead of doing cultures, we take a swab and we use a genetic method to screen for all bacteria and all yeast present at 99.9% accuracy, which means we can identify infections in a more accurate, precise way, but we can also tell whether your vaginal microbiome or your vaginal ecosystem is protecting you. It's like, is the door closed or is it open? Because if it's open, anything can go in. And if it's not healthy, then you will struggle with things like chronic inflammation, chronic infections, pelvic floor pain, pelvic floor diseases, and so on. And so this is the service that we're offering. Part of it is screening that environment to see if if it's healthy, if it's not healthy, and if it's not healthy, could it be explaining the symptoms or the problems that the woman is experiencing at the time? And this then not only provides answers, but it also accelerates research and understanding into this black box that no one has bothered looking into or trying to understand, which is really, really important. But we also provide access to intimate health practitioners. A lot of these issues, we know medical help is very important. You need to get antibiotics when you need them. However, these problems keep recurring. And so it takes more than just medication to return that health. And so we have a holistic arm, which is you get to have a consultation with a holistic practitioner who works with you in reducing the risk of recurring infections or helping that environment be more healthy. And that's what we've been doing. And we've recently started also offering the seminal testing, which is we look at bacteria in the semen. Because let's be honest, you can't treat a woman for infections or bacterial issues in the vagina if it's in the semen. So we must be looking in the semen also.
It sounds so empowering to women to be able to just take their health into their own hands. These are at-home tests, correct?
Yes. It's an at-home swab, simple, shallow swab. So, it can be done for anyone at any age. It's not invasive. The only downside is that it takes a bit of time for results to come around. And that is simply down to the method that is used for the screening. And so it does take a little time, but it means that you get a lot more data and a lot more insight.
It sounds like it would be worth the wait. You also mentioned that just the importance of educating women about their own bodies. Can you just provide some examples of how ScreenMe is actively involved in educating communities and practitioners and just the general public in women's health?
Absolutely. I think it's actually half, for me, getting a diagnosis and understanding what was happening in my body was maybe 50% of the way of feeling better. I think the amount of anxiety and pain that I felt was because I didn't feel like I was in control. My body did not feel like it's under control. And that was very anxiety inducing. Once I actually got insights into my body, I got understanding of my body, suddenly that anxiety was a lot less. I felt a lot more in power of what is happening. Even if my body was sometimes acting up, I was not losing it because I knew what was happening. And that's so important. It's so important for women to know parts of their body, understand how things work, and then understand how to manage them. There are things we can't make miracles happen. So we can't fix problems a lot of the time. But what we can do is explain what is going on. And what we can do is give tools for someone to manage those issues. So I think education is where it all starts and where it all ends. And that's what we need to know. We're not educating young girls about their bodies. Women are thrown into life without the tools they need in order to prevent disease. And so once disease happens, we want to identify it and we want to somehow fix it. Whereas actually, let's start before that. Let's start educating young girls. I'm a big advocate of education at schools. I think we need to be speaking at schools about, intimate health, not sex. We're doing that already. We're doing that well. But we need to also start talking about diseases, how to stay healthy. How does, as a woman, as a girl with a vagina, whether you are sexually active or not, how do you take care of your vagina? What signs do you look out for? How do you prevent that ecosystem becoming unhealthy and then putting you at risk like cervical cancer? I mean, we're screening people for HPV. Why aren't we giving them the tools to reduce the risk of contracting HPV or clearing out HPV once they have it? And so we push for education at schools. We work with practitioners in getting, practitioners work with women in handling their symptoms. We work with practitioners in improving their education about the vagina and about the vaginal microbiome and bacterial infections and so on, which gives practitioners this extra tool and insight to help women. But most importantly, it's helping the end. So every customer we have, part of our service is education. We don't just do a test and results. We do a test, you receive results, and then you sit down with someone who will talk to you about your body, about your results, what all of this means for you as a woman and how you can help yourself.
Wonderful. And you also mentioned that you're applying for some grants in the Middle East. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I think as a woman of Middle Eastern roots, it was always very important to me that what I do is not just limited to one part of the world. And my vision for ScreenMe is a platform that empowers and educates women globally. And so having done this in the UK and having now ScreenMe being at a really good stage where it's self-sustaining, we're doing what we're doing well, it was, I thought it's time to expand out and try and increase education and bring the spotlight on women's health in the Middle East also, where this still hasn't happened. And women deserve the same amount of knowledge and service that we have here in the UK. And so we are applying for grants to allow us to build platforms that can allow women to educate themselves, to get the services and the products even that they deserve and they need in order to take control of their health, reduce risk of disease, and break some taboos as well in culturally appropriate ways. I always say we're not looking to change cultures or take away people's values or their societal systems. We're looking to provide the information and education that is needed in the most appropriate way possible for each society. And so that's what we're applying for grants for, which is quite exciting. I'm hoping that hopefully in the next year, we're going to be able to really make some difference in women's health in the Middle East also.
That's an incredible achievement. What are some other achievements that stand out to you since you started ScreenMe in 2019?
Gosh, we started with the idea on paper when COVID just kicked in. That was really difficult because we were two scientists with no business backgrounds, starting something much bigger than ourselves at the time. And then COVID came and it was even more difficult to navigate that space. We didn't think that we'd get as far as we have gotten. So being able to get through that period and not give up, I think a lot of companies did. Being able to actually keep to it and not give up is something that I'm very proud of. The other is, I think, being a woman in business is another thing. A lot of people talk about how being a woman in business not being taken seriously, but I think actually there is such a pressure on women to be masculine in the business world. There's so much pressure, to behave in masculine ways, to adopt masculine ways, to play the male game. And I think for me, it's been really important to actually try and say, actually, you can be a woman and do this at the same time. You can embrace everything that comes with being a woman and be successful and start all of this. I think creating an environment at ScreenMe where women feel safe working and being a woman was very important to me. One of our employees sadly had a miscarriage not long ago. And she was, I realized that she was very anxious about the fact that she has had a miscarriage. She needed time off. And to me, it seems such a normal thing, to accommodate for and to make happen. And it was only then that I realized a lot of companies don't. And a lot of companies don't actually create an environment where men and women feel safe enough to express their limitations or concerns or events in life that may interfere with work and not be afraid of losing their job or losing their career path. So I'm really proud of ScreenMe for not just the service we provide, but also from a corporate journey, starting a company that has already started putting down the values that as a company we are going to accommodate for people and their health and their journey, whether men or women. Reproductive health is important and is part of your health. So whether it be menopause, whether it be periods, fertility, I'm proud of ScreenMe for being at the forefront of environments where people feel safe.
Exactly. Well, and transitioning from that, how important is just the women in tech movement to you? And in what ways do you see that just contributing to a more equitable future?
A lot. It's huge. I think I'm hoping for a time where women in tech is not even a thing, where we don't have to say women in tech because the industry does not differentiate between women and men. And that's what we want, right? I mean, this is what we're working for. Because there hasn't been this space made previously, we have to fight for it. So we have to say women in tech. We have to make space for women in tech. But hopefully we're going to get to a point where it will not be an issue that we need to discuss or talk about or differentiate anymore. We'll be at an understanding where being a woman does not mean limiting. And also to avoid limitations, I feel like sometimes to get equal pay, to get equal rights, to get equal position, we have to go through all these things. But actually, I want to be treated the same as a man does at work. I don't want to be treated the same. I want to be given equal opportunities. And given equal opportunities means leveling the field. It does not mean ignoring it. So actually, as a woman who has endometriosis, who goes through painful cycles every month, I cannot be treated the same as someone who doesn't have periods or does not experience it. I have, the field has to be made level for me. I have to be able to take the time I need off in order to do my work. And I think this is the thing with women, and also women in tech and women in any field, women in finance and women in any other field. I think this field progressing means that we're not just putting women in those positions, but we're also acknowledging that women have needs, specific individual needs that need to be accommodated for in the workplace, in these industries, for those industries to thrive, not just a woman. I think it's both of them.
That's mic drop. And I hope all of that is said in your future TED Talk. But in the next 5 years, where do you see the key trends in women's health heading, especially with just increasing health consciousness in society?
So I think there's going to be a lot of preventative side of things moving. I think there's a lot of focus on that. The other side is at-home services. We see a massive growth in at-home services and investment going into that. It's amazing how much we can actually do at home if we put enough research and money into it. We now see things like even fertility treatments happening at home, which is amazing. We also see technology moving forward. Unfortunately, when it comes to women's health, we're still using tools that are ancient, that we shouldn't be using anymore. And what we're seeing with the women's health growth, the women's health field growth, is replacement of these ancient, often painful, often inefficient tools being replaced by modern, efficient, more accurate ways. So hopefully more diagnosis, accurate diagnosis and prevention.
I love that. And I look forward to just continuing that conversation. I think it's up to us as women to not be ashamed to talk about these things and to really just to share it. And, our sister friends, just to talk about it openly and honestly, and just encourage one another to go and seek help and find answers. That's going to be so important.
Absolutely. And once we do that, realize that we are not alone. If you have a problem, whatever part of the body that's regarding, as soon as you start talking about it, you very quickly realize that not only are you not alone, there's 10 other people at the table who are experiencing it and feel the same way. They feel like they can't discuss it. It takes just one person to open that door and one person to initiate those conversations. And those conversations are what will lead to change. Without them, we can't change.
Well, and for anyone listening to this who may be inspired to start their own business in women's health, what is the biggest piece of career advice or important piece of career advice you would give them?
Don't overthink. Just do it. Even if you don't quite know what you're doing or where you're going, don't try to figure it out. Just take that next step. I would say whatever door opens, take it. see where that takes you. Because I think a lot of us, especially women, we have a tendency to be quite cautious and fearful. We think ahead, and it's evolutionary behavior to have, we want to make sure it's safe. We want to make sure that we're not going to fail, or, our investment energy and time isn't going to be wasted. But when it comes to business, I think once you have an idea, or you have at least the willpower, you want to do something, just take that one step that's in front of you and figure out the rest later. I think I made that mistake in the beginning where I was very cautious.
Well said. And it wouldn't be the Heroes of Healthcare podcast if we didn't ask, who is someone that is inspirational to you and you admire that you would say is your hero?
I mean, I think it's going to be a cheesy reply, isn't it? I would definitely say my father. I think as a businessman and a Middle Eastern man, I think he's gone far beyond creating an environment where me as a woman has felt safe, heard, and even empowered enough to come out and empower others and even educate him on women's health. I think if we need more men who are open to learning about women and their health and are there to empower women to close those gaps and really reach their potentials.
We look forward to following ScreenMe and just continuing to cheer on the efforts that you're making to just change the women's health industry for so many. Thank you again for being on, and we will be here for anything you need in the future.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to Heroes of Healthcare. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell a friend or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit us at www.heroesofhealthcarepodcast.com for more information or to listen to past episodes. Thanks again to our sponsor, Jackson & Coker Locum Tenens, providing interim physicians and advanced practice staff for over 40 years.